Kick things off by taking a look at the day's headlines. President Moon Jae-in is in Bangkok for a series of multilateral meetings. Attention is being drawn to whether he will have more interactions with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe after they briefly saw each other last night. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says Washington may not need to impose tariffs on imported cars this month after holding good conversations with South Korea, Japan and the EU. Plus, flash mob rallies erupt inside shopping centres across Hong Kong, sparking clashes with riot police and hundreds of arrests. In a separate incident, a man with a knife injures 5 people and bites off part of a pro-democracy politician's ear. Our top story this morning, though, President Moon Jae-in will take part in a series of ASEAN meetings in Bangkok, the capital of Thailand, in the coming hours. Attention is on whether he will again meet Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe after their brief encounter at a gala dinner last night. The two countries, of course, are going through a bit of a torrid time over trade and historical issues at the moment. Our Park Hee-jun files this report from Bangkok.
On Monday, President Moon Jae-in will participate in a marathon of ASEAN-related summit meetings in Bangkok. He will attend the ASEAN Plus 3 Summit, a special luncheon on sustainable development, the East Asia Summit, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership talks. His key message will revolve around the upcoming special summits with ASEAN and Mekong countries in Korea's southern city of Busan at the end of November. Ever since taking office, President Moon has been emphasizing the importance of strengthening ties with ASEAN nations. He's kept true to his word, becoming the first South Korean leader to visit all 10 ASEAN countries. And with the Korea-ASEAN Special Summit and the Korea-Mekong Summit just 3 weeks away, his main mission will be to gather support for the biggest international conference under his presidency.
Seeing how we're here in Thailand at the start of the month and finishing the line in Busan later this month, we can say November is the month of Korea-ASEAN ties.
President Moon will also explain his administration's efforts to establish peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, asking for leader support for his proposal to turn the demilitarized zone into a global peace zone, as he mentioned in his speech to the UN General Assembly in September. Another focal point is whether President Moon will interact with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe again. The two leaders exchanged greetings and shook hands at the gala dinner the previous day, their first face-to-face in 4 months since the G20 summit in Osaka. President Moon's letter that was hand-delivered to Abe by South Korean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon during his recent visit to Tokyo and Abe's message of condolence to Moon over his mother's passing last week are seen to have nudged the atmosphere in a more positive direction. Watchers say it's premature to call it a breakthrough, but it could set a new direction for their bilateral relations, which are at a low not seen in years due to historical and trade disputes. Although the Blue House says there's no one-on-one plan during this trip, the leaders will inevitably run into each other as they attend the various ASEAN meetings. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News, Bangkok.
South Korea's Nat'l Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang says the issue of Japan's wartime sexual slavery of Korean women requires a sincere apology. In an interview with the Japanese daily Asahi Shimbun on Sunday, Moon said there have been talks between Seoul and Tokyo over the issue, but they have produced no fruitful outcomes as grief, anger and bitterness lingers in the hearts of the victims. However, the speaker expressed sorrow for his earlier remarks in which he called for the Japanese emperor to apologize over the issue. The parliamentary speaker added that he has drawn up a bill that will support the Korean victims of Japan's colonial-era forced labor. Moon arrived in Japan on Sunday for a 4-day trip to attend the G20 Speakers Summit. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says the Trump administration may not need to impose tariffs on imported cars later this month. He revealed that Washington has had, quote, good conversations with a number of nations, including South Korea. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
Speaking to Bloomberg Television on Sunday at the ASEAN Plus 3 Summit in Bangkok, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said Washington may delay plans to put auto tariffs on a number of countries after holding what he called good conversations with them. South Korea, was earlier exempted from any future tariffs after renegotiating the South Korea-US FTA last year. The U.S. also struck a deal with Japan last month, but the EU has yet to reach an agreement with the deadline looming. However, Ross remained optimistic a deal will be reached. This comes as the Trump administration agreed to delay new tariffs on imported cars and parts for 6 months in May as it continued negotiations. President Trump must decide whether to impose tariffs of 5 to 15% by November 17th, but Ross says it may be unnecessary in light of the negotiations. However, if Trump proceeds with the measures, it will cause a massive escalation in the U.S.-EU trade conflict, with German automakers like Mercedes-Benz and BMW taking the biggest hit. Experts say such tariffs would significantly increase car prices in the United States and potentially lead to hundreds of thousands of jobs falling by the wayside in the U.S. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, November will be a busy month for South Korea in terms of defense and security matters. Seoul and Washington are set to discuss defense agenda items next week, including, but not limited to, defense cost sharing. Seoul is also expected to face intense pressure from not only the US but also Japan to overturn its decision to terminate its military intel sharing pact with Tokyo ahead of its expiration. That's going to happen towards the end of this month. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The defense chiefs of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan are set to attend the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus held in Thailand from November 16th to 19th. As the meeting comes right before the expiration of the General Security of Military Information Agreement, or GSOMIA, on November 22nd, Tokyo and Washington are expected to up the pressure on Seoul to withdraw its decision to terminate the military intel sharing agreement.
I am a half-glass full person as well. I'm hopeful that they'll get beyond this because
On November 15th, the defense chiefs of Seoul and Washington are scheduled to sit down in Seoul to discuss pending issues between the two allies. The allies' Joint Crisis Management Manual, which stipulates the role of the ROK-US Combined Command in case a crisis breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, will be one of the major agenda items for that meeting. Washington has proposed that the manual be revised so the concept of crisis warranting a joint response includes not only contingencies on the Korean Peninsula, but also those of the U.S. Such a revision will lay the legal ground for the U.S. to request Seoul send troops to jointly deal with situations in other parts of the world, including the Middle East and South China Sea. The issue of defense cost sharing is also expected to be a hotly debated topic, as Washington has requested Seoul to pay up to $5 billion in 2020, which is 6 times more than South Korea paid this year.
I will exert my utmost effort to strike a win-win deal for the South Korea-US alliance.
Seoul and Washington are also set to discuss the envisioned transfer of wartime operational control of South Korean forces from Washington to Seoul. They will also talk about Washington's proposal for intensifying the role of the UN command in managing crises on the Korean Peninsula, even after OPCON is returned to South Korea. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea is facing a whole slew of diplomatic challenges at the moment, with its once promising relationship with North Korea grinding to a standstill, and its ties with Japan, as we've been hearing, sitting at the lowest point in years. So we thought we'd ask a well-respected professor and author what he thinks Seoul could do to turn things back into its favor. Here's our Kim Bok-young.
Jared Diamond, renowned writer of the book Guns, Germs and Steel, has come to Korea to promote his new book, Upheaval, and has some advice that might help Seoul find solutions to the diplomatic problems it is currently facing. In particular, he made 2 key recommendations to South Korea regarding its ties with Japan and North Korea. According to Diamond, although South Korea and Japan are both facing potential adversaries in the region, such as China and North Korea, unresolved historical issues were hampering their cooperation. He said a sincere apology from Japan was the key to restoring ties, but added that Korea must wait patiently until the Japanese come to a reckoning on its own with the country's wartime past. Still, the professor emphasized that the two countries need to maintain cooperation in certain areas.
Both South Korea and Japan face big problems with the depletion of fisheries around the world. Both South Korea and Japan face big problems from dangerous neighbors. So even though South Korea and Japan may disagree strongly about some things, it would be good to work with Japan on the things where you have the same goals to foster cooperation in at least some areas.
Touching upon inter-Korean ties, Professor Diamond emphasized the importance of steady back-channel dialogue in order to break the current impasse. He named Finland as a possible benchmark for South Korea to look to, with the Scandinavian country having found a way to survive despite bordering Russia to the east, formerly the Soviet Union.
The Finns learned that what they do is engage in constant discussions. They're not publicized discussions. They're off-the-record discussions with Russia at every level, from the presidents to cabinet ministers to government officials to low government officials.
The eminent author shares more of his insight in his new book, showing ways the world can deal with global challenges, citing the examples of 7 countries that went through a national political crisis. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
2 bodies found near Dokdo have been confirmed to be the vice captain and a mechanic of the helicopter that crashed last Thursday near Korea's easternmost islets. The Eastern Regional Coast Guard said on Sunday that it confirmed the identity of the 2 bodies through DNA analysis and fingerprint scanning. The bodies have been transferred to a morgue. 5 people remain unaccounted for. 7 people were on the chopper when it crashed into the sea. 5 of them were rescue workers attempting to airlift an injured fisherman and his companion to hospital. Now, the sharing economy is really starting to take off here in South Korea, but it still faces a great many obstacles, especially in its mobility platforms, as the heads of a local ride-sharing service or ride-hailing service were indicted last week for operating without the necessary license. Our Kim Jae-hee provides a closer look at the outlook for the sharing economy in South Korea.
This secure, mutually beneficial platform connects its host and guest, where rooms are rented out at a reasonable price based on blockchain technology. But things are not easy for home-sharing services in Korea. The CEO of the company bemoaned the many obstacles in the way of further expansion, including outdated regulation.
A tourism law passed in 2011 only allows foreigners to access homestay services, which are not available for local tourists. Instead of creating a way for local startups to tap into the domestic market, the government blocked it altogether.
Home sharing is not the only sector that has run into legal roadblocks. South Korea's ride-hailing platform Tada is in hot water after company executives were indicted by prosecutors on charges of running the service without a legal license. Even global sharing economy platforms are failing in Korea, with Uber Eats pulling out of the country last month amid tough competition. Local sharing economy platforms are concerned whether Korea can keep up with the global trend due to regulatory setbacks and resistance from traditional businesses.
Sharing economy is fundamentally based on IT technology. So naturally, South Korea should be at the forefront when it comes to adopting sharing economy services. But it's not. It's lagging behind because of regulations that are dragging it down.
Experts say changes are needed for Korea to keep pace with the global competition.
The fourth industrial revolution and the shift towards the sharing economy is the world's biggest stream of innovation. Korea will have to quickly catch up, and the government should take action to facilitate peace and compromise between traditional industries and new startups.
Expert also added that it isn't too late for Korea to fulfill its potential and encouraged the government's push for a negative regulatory system, which deems all activities legal unless they are expressly banned by the law. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
The pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong has entered its 22nd week of unrest, and the protests over the weekend were particularly intense and quite violent, it must be said. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Dami. Dami, hundreds of demonstrators were detained by police in Hong Kong over the weekend.
Right, Mark. Hong Kong police arrested several hundreds of people, including 200 on a Saturday alone. And anti-Chinese sentiment has grown stronger than ever. Political differences led to a fight at a shopping mall where a man attacked a family of 4 with a knife, leaving a total of 6 people injured. One of the injured included a district councillor who had part of his ear bitten off. And on Saturday, protesters took to the streets with their guerrilla-styled rallies across the island. Buildings, including China's official Xinhua News Agency, were vandalized by protesters, and armed riot police fired tear gas at them. The protests followed China's claim last week to tighten control over Hong Kong and Macau, particularly when it comes to national security issues and nomination of principal officers. Saudi Aramco kicked off its initial public offering on Sunday in what could be the world's largest ever IPO. Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil giant made the big announcement that the final offer price, number of shares to be sold, and percentage of the shares to be sold will be determined at the end of the book building period. Analysts say the world's largest integrated oil and gas company is expected to make 1 or 2% of shares available. Saudi Aramco is thought to be worth at least around $1.2 trillion, making it the most valuable company in the world. A matter of days after its former leader's death, Islamic State affiliates have been pledging their allegiance to the terror group's new leader. The group released several pictures of militants on Sunday, allegedly from Bangladesh, standing under the group's black flag. The agency also posted other photos showing militants, supposedly from Egypt's Sinai, with their rifles and index fingers raised, pledging allegiance to their new leader, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashami al-Quraishi. Such move marked the first show of support from ISIS international networks.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. All trains operated by Seoul Subway Line 9 will be lengthened to 6-car trains from today, as the line aims to shed its rather infamous title as the most crowded line in the whole of the South Korean capital. Starting from the end of November, the Seoul Metropolitan Government says it also plans to increase the 37 trains currently running on a typical workday to 40, so an extra 3 trains a day. Subway Line 9 is especially crowded, as you can see, during morning and evening rush hours, since the trains, before today anyway, were only 4 cars long, and because it's on what is considered a golden route that stops at major transit stations at a much faster speed, especially if you take the express ones, than other lines in Seoul. Now, the best way to keep our brains young and healthy is through physical exercise. Now, exercise also helps reduce anxiety and depression and is also effective in increasing creativity. Park Se-young with more.
The brain accounts for 2 to 3% of body weight and consumes about 20% of daily energy intake. It functions best after exercise because exercise secretes serotonin and dopamine, which activate the brain and put it in its optimal condition.
What happens when we exercise is we use more of our brain cells than in any other human activity. And when we use our brain cells, that makes our brain better, tougher.
According to the professor, exercise is as effective in reducing anxiety and depression as taking antidepressants or tranquilizers. Our bodies were designed to move as a result of the hunter-gatherer lives of our ancestors, and exercise strengthens the brain just like muscle. Exercise is also effective in increasing creativity.
So we see throughout history that many of our famous authors and thinkers use walking or moving, or Einstein riding his bicycle, to help come up with ideas and be creative.
The professor says we can change our brains by exercising, like walking fast or running 4 times a week. The most important thing is exercising steadily, and working out with other people is recommended because it is much more effective. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Tickets for a newly opened monorail, the Wolmi Sea Train, are selling out every day, with passengers eager to take the train and visit tourist hotspots on Wolmi-do Island. The island in Incheon, which is west of Seoul, has been named one of the 100 must-visit places in the whole of South Korea by the Korea Tourism Organization. Our Ji-young went to check it out and files this report.
South Korea's longest urban tourist monorail, the Wolmi Sea Train, stops at a number of popular attractions, including theme parks and streets full of cafes and seafood restaurants. According to an official from the Incheon Transit Corporation, roughly 1,400 people a day board the train on average. As it carries a maximum of 46 passengers per ride and only 4 or 5 trains operate every hour, the tickets tend to sell out quickly.
We open at 10 a.m. and close at 6 p.m., but visitors come even before the service starts at around 9 and wait for 2 to 4 hours to ride the monorail.
The 2-car monorail loops around 4 stations, including Wolmi Park Entrance and Culture Street, at a speed of 10 kilometers per hour.
This monorail service runs roughly 6 kilometers from Incheon Station to several places on Wolmi-do Island. Passengers can get a great view of the coastal waters of Incheon, as the racetrack is as high as 18 meters in places.
During their 35-minute journey around the circular route, passengers can also enjoy the famous view of Wolmi-do Island, including the silo wall painting, which holds the Guinness World Record for the largest outdoor mural in the world.
I saw silo wall paintings, amusement parks, cruise ships, and the beautiful glow of sunset over the sea. It was a fun ride.
Passengers can also get off and reboard the train to move from one spot to another on Wolmi-do Island.
I came all the way from Gwangmyeong City in Gyeonggi-do to visit Incheon. It was a fun ride, and I took the train to Chinatown to have noodles with black soybean sauce and enjoy the tour at Songwol-dong Fairy Tale Village.
The construction of the monorail was mostly completed in 2009, but service only began in October of this year after a number of safety issues were rectified. Ji-young, Arirang News, Incheon.
Good morning. It's shaping up to be another day of wide temperature differences between lows and highs across much of the country, so be sure to dress accordingly on your way out. The top temperatures will range between 17 and 20 degrees Celsius in most areas, and central regions will be under lots of sunshine throughout the day today, while Jeju Island will see 5 to 20 millimeters of on and off rainfall. Enjoy the warmer than average temperatures for the first half of the week, as readings will gradually drop and we will have a glimpse of winter by this Friday morning, which is Ipdong, the beginning of winter according to the traditional calendar. So let's make the most of this late autumn weather with beautiful autumn colors. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV, and a reminder that our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.
Following the inter-Korean summits in the